Good afternoon, Canada. Hello, my name is Andrew Lawton, a fellow with True North, here for another Facebook Live, the True North Report, as we talk about things that are happening around the world, but more importantly, things that are happening in Canada, or at least have a very direct connection to things that really we're trying to raise awareness about in Canada. And there's a lot to talk about today. If you're just tuning in, which you couldn't have tuned in any earlier because we just started it, but we are going to go through not just the breaking news that we actually released before the mainstream media did through True North yesterday, that Canada Border Services Agency had charged a woman it alleges was smuggling humans across the border, smuggling asylum claimants into Canada illegally, but also a lot of the backstory on not just this idea of human smuggling in the last couple of years, but also the history of what's happening in regards to Roxham Road. And when I say history, I don't mean 10, 20 years ago. I'm talking about the history from the last 3 years, which can be more aptly characterized as a living history. So I'm going to talk about all of that. But if you missed the report, I'm going to read directly from CBSA here, because Canada Border Services Agency, which, and I think it's important to know, they do very important work. They do very good work. You've got very professional people there, incredibly under-resourced and understaffed. So they're having to make do with a lot less than they would like. And that's because, I mean, simple supply and demand. I mean, the demand for their services is going up, but the supply is, of course, nowhere near matching that of what they have to work with. And the CBSA, which is responsible not just for securing and protecting the border and also inland enforcement, but the CBSA is also responsible for bringing people who seek asylum through the channels so they can make that claim. And if someone is found to be worthy of deportation, CBSA is the body responsible for making it happen. With that being said, the report that came out yesterday from the Canada Border Services Agency is that it charged a woman by the name of Olayinka Celestina Opalai under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act for organizing illegal entry into Canada via Roxham Road in Montérégie, Quebec, for refugee protection claimants in exchange for compensation. The CBSA says that it investigated, and through the course of its investigation, it found that in the summer of 2017, so about a year and a half ago, Ms. Opalai allegedly organized the illegal entry of several individuals into Canada, and I'm going to go back to that term several in a moment. And also, this is the more telling part of this, it alleges that Opalai was operating as part of a network of smugglers who organized travel for these people in exchange for compensation. And the CBSA, as I noted in my video yesterday, when it comes to irregular migration, quote, says it works in close cooperation with the government departments and agencies, yada, 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 as well as international partners. So this may have been a cross-border investigation. It probably was, and I'll tell you why I think that later on. But in this 3-paragraph long press release, we have a few major takeaways here. Number one is Roxham Road and the significance of that particular, I don't even want to call it a border crossing because it isn't officially a border crossing, but it's a dead-end road which is being treated like a freeway by illegal asylum seekers. And the other part of this is that the entry of several individuals is alleged, and Opalai is allegedly part of a network of smugglers. And these few details are important here, because one thing that wasn't in the actual release from Canada Border Services Agency, and this is rare, because I get police press releases all the time and they say, oh, you know, so-and-so's been charged with X, and they'll give you the very name of the charge and typically the number in the act. And CBSA didn't do this in its initial press release. The department said that they charged her with illegally smuggling or organizing illegal entry, but it didn't give the name of the specific offense. And I found that to be a little odd. So I did a bit more digging, and CBSA did eventually clarify what the provision was. And the section is 117 subsection 3. And this is, or subsection 3.1, or sorry, just 3. 3.1 something else. But it's human smuggling and trafficking, 117. And I want to read what the specific language is in this, and you'll understand why it's important. I'm sorry if I'm boring you here, but you'll get it in a moment. No person shall organize, induce, aid, or abet the coming into Canada of one or more persons, knowing that or being reckless as to whether their coming into Canada is or would be in contravention of the Act. So that means no one can help someone come into the country knowing that they're breaking the law. But this is where subsection 3 comes in. A person who contravenes subsection 1, so that's what I just read, with respect to a group of 10 persons or more, is guilty of an offense and liable on conviction by way of indictment to a fine of not more than $1 million or to life imprisonment, which is, or both. So she's been charged with a provision that means she smuggled allegedly more than 10 people into the country. Now the next level up is 50 persons. So at 50 persons or more, the sentence and the charge are elevated. So CBSA has not given much in the way of details here, but their allegation, the basis of their investigation, is that this woman smuggled somewhere between 10 and 50 people. Now there's a big range there, but between 10 and 50 people allegedly, and in exchange for compensation. Now, I don't know what the going rate is for smuggling an asylum seeker across the border. I don't know what the going rate is. I know that if you live in Quebec and apparently you don't like the economic situation, there's apparently a way you can make a bit of extra cash here, and this is what this woman is alleged to be doing. But this is so very telling because we have one person charged. One person in this particular case, and police are saying she's responsible for 10 or more, but less than 50, but she herself is part of a network. And every time Justin Trudeau has said that there is no crisis taking place at the border, or Ahmed Hassan has said, no, the system's working fine and the border's fine and these legitimate claimants are going through the process, we're vetting them. Every time that happens, what they are saying is that people like me and people like Candace Malcolm and people like Anthony Fury are, you insert the moniker they use, the ad hominem attack, but we're the problem because we're raising it. And when we say there's a crisis at the borders, when Andrew Scheer and Maxime Bernier say there is a crisis at the borders, and the government says no, we fast forward to this particular story, and we see something that shows, that proves demonstrably that people are deliberately and willfully manipulating and abusing not just our border, but our asylum claim process. I've seen a number of estimates. Rhonda in the comment section, hi Rhonda, is giving that she's heard 5,000 a person. That's what she's heard. I don't know. I've seen lower. I've seen higher. The specific dollar amount is not as relevant here. Although I did say that I was curious. I am, but regardless of what it is, you don't do that unless you are sure that you've got a chain of custody of bringing the migrant to the border into the country. And again, if we're talking about people that are paying someone to smuggle them into another country, it's not unreasonable that these people could be lying their way through the asylum claim process. Because remember, the government's vetting of these asylum claimants is only as good as its ability to address what they themselves are saying. And if the type of person that we're looking at here, that we're vetting, is the same type that's going to pay someone, however much the dollar amount is, to be smuggled into the country, this is not a legitimate claimant. It's not a legitimate asylum seeker. And we've got two primary problems here. Number one is that it's not a perfect system when people are abusing it. And number two, even if an asylum claimant is rejected, the backlog is so long that for up to 2 or even more years while waiting a hearing, you're on the taxpayer dole. You're in the country. You've made it into Canada, and you've got 2 years where you don't really have to worry about a darn thing, and maybe you leave at the end of it, maybe you stay illegally, maybe the government deports you, maybe they don't. But the fact remains that you're already here. You are already here. And if the price tag of that is worth it for these people who maybe they have something to hide, maybe they're just desperate. I don't know, it doesn't matter. But the fact that we have not just a smuggler who's been now by police allegations, by CBSA's allegations, caught, but someone who is part of what they say is a network, that means it has to be advantageous for them and for the people that are coming into the country that way. And if you are a genuine asylum claimant, you don't need someone like Olayinka. If you're a genuine asylum claimant, you don't need a fixer. You don't need a smuggler. If you actually have a claim that is going to give you asylum status in the eyes of Canada, you don't need to do what these people are doing. And it's despicable, but it's not an isolated incident. And we've seen, I knew of a couple of cases, but I looked into this a little bit further and found a number of these types of situations, a number of examples here. One of them, and this was a big one back in Saskatchewan in 2017, so around the same time, and this was the border near, I think it was Emerson, Manitoba, or southeastern Saskatchewan. It was one of the two. And this is a Canadian and an American, the couple that it sounds like were arrested for smuggling foreign nationals into the country illegally. And police ended up catching them. I know they charged him. I don't know if they charged the wife. We had another case back in 2016 where a Cornwall man was arrested in a smuggling process across the border. And this was one that they found 3 foreign nationals. Again, smuggling. And this is something that we're seeing not just in Quebec at Roxham Road, we're seeing across the country and into Canada, people from the US into Canada. And I want to look at some of the numbers here because it's very telling when you look at the processes behind this here. So Roxham Road is where about 96%, the latest number I've seen is where 96% of illegal border crossers into Canada are crossing into. So you've got the longest unprotected border in the world between Canada and the US, but somehow, and people are going to go across illegally, I get that, but somehow 96% of everyone who does that does it at this one particular part. And I've never been there. Candace Malcolm went there and wrote a great column about it that you should check out. But I have never been there. In my pilgrimages to Quebec and Montreal, I've never decided to go down to the land of lawlessness. And it sounds like it must be this, terrain like something you'd see in Mexico, where you've got people under gunfire, sneaking under the giant border wall. But in actuality, and you can look it up on Google Street View, it's a dead-end road. It's a dead-end road, and at the end of it, there's a sign. And on the American side, or facing the Americans at least, but on the Canadian side, facing the US, a sign that says it's illegal to come in here and you shouldn't do it and it's mean. And then just past the sign, and you don't see this on Google Street View, but just past the sign, you have a whole bunch of things that have been done by government and law enforcement in Canada to make it easier for people to come in illegally. So you've got a permanent CBSA babysitter, which is not turning people away. You've got RCMP, which are, helping the illegals with their luggage. And I think like offering them a hot towel when they come in and perhaps a nice welcome beverage, like when you go to a Caribbean resort. And you've got, then again, I think there actually might even be a red carpet now. I think there's a heritage plaque and a red carpet there, which is basically indicating the profound growth of the Canadian institution that this illegal border crossing has ended up becoming. And it's sickening because the RCMP and CBSA have conspired by order of the government, it's not them going rogue, to set up structures as well. They've put up buildings, they put up processing centers. And, the suggestion that I think everyone needs to embrace here is make this an official border crossing. Make it an official border crossing, cut out the flow of illegal migrants into this part of the country. And if they cross illegally somewhere else, keep doing it. And I'm sorry, we're only a few more thousand of these things away from having to put up our own border wall anyway, but make it an official border crossing point so that someone who enters to seek asylum from the US can be turned away. And I know that for a lot of you, this will not be new information. You've heard this before, but for those who haven't, let me take 7 seconds to explain. The Safe Third Country Act basically says that Canada and the US are safe countries. So if you have status in one, you cannot then go to the other and seek asylum because you've already been given asylum. That's the rationale. But the Safe Third Country Act only applies to people that cross at legal checkpoints. So if the border crossing from Port Huron to Sarnia, Ontario is an official checkpoint, and Detroit Windsor is an official checkpoint, and Derby Line, Vermont, and whatever the Quebec side, Magog, Quebec, or whatever, is an official one. You can go, in the case of the land crossings, you can walk like 20 meters to the right, and if you do it illegally, once you get to the other side, they cannot turn you back because, oh, you're an asylum claimant. And by the way, asylum claims are meant to be for people that are genuinely fleeing something. When you can go through the process of paying a fixer to smuggle you across, to guide you, to coach you, to get you there, this is no longer asylum. This is now an industry, and a very lucrative industry. But we're not talking about people that need saving from anything other than what the state should be doing, which is arresting them and sending them home. So 96% of illegal border crossers into Canada are crossing at that point. And when we look at the numbers here, some of the numbers are just absolutely staggering. We had in 2017 50,000 people that entered Canada to file asylum claims. In 2018, 56,000, almost 55,700 in 2018. And this is from the federal government, and that's a combination of legal and illegal. But the rises we're seeing are coming from the illegal border crossers. And in 2018, despite the government saying that they had dealt with this, we saw steady increases, including at the end of the year. We saw an uptick in this. So when we see this and we see the government's inaction on it, and now we have people charged with fostering this smuggling, fostering it, the question is, why do we not have a government that's willing to accept this is in fact a crisis? Why do we not have a government that's saying, all right, well, maybe we should deal with it? No, and the government is complicit in this. The government is absolutely complicit. And if you see this, then you'll know that Trudeau's Welcome to Canada tweet has created this industry. So when Justin Trudeau wants to say that he has a good record of creating jobs, yeah, he's created a very booming cross-border human smuggling operation. I mean, that's the only industry in Canada that I think is actually creating jobs and creating wealth. If you're a human smuggler, now's the time, because we have a border checkpoint that is, once you get to Canada, helping you. Do you remember? Okay, so every now and then you'll hear in a story, and my wife's making me watch Breaking Bad. And so far, Breaking Bad doesn't have like an inside man at like the DEA or something like that. But, in all the crime movies and the mob movies, there's always like the one person in the government that's on the take that's helping the things go. In this case, it's not one crooked person that's on the take. In this case, the CBSA and the RCMP are actually doing the work of the smugglers. Like these institutions, the smuggler gets them to the border, and then our government takes it from there. Like, do you realize how absurd and how disgusting it is that the human smuggler is only having to do half the work because the Canadian authorities are doing the rest of it? And this is so insane that we now in Canada are part of this era where our border is fluid and irrelevant, and our immigration system is becoming a farce, so that criminals, smugglers, alleged and convicted, know it and are profiting from it. And like I said, not a new problem. Going back 2016, 2017, 2018, since the very beginning of this asylum crisis, we've seen these cases. But again, there's very little media attention to them. I look at this one that came yesterday. There was one news report yesterday. We had it out very, very quickly. And it wasn't until this morning or late last night that the mainstream media started to pick up on this. And we still see very little information. And I don't think there's going to be much follow-up. And I want to know who the rest of this network is. Police say this woman was part of a network. Well, where are the rest? Where are the indictments coming around? And what's happening to the people that she smuggled? Allegedly. But will the people that this woman is accused of smuggling, will they automatically have their claims revoked? And will they automatically be deported? I don't think they will, but they certainly should be. They certainly should be. And I want to read another one of these bits of information here. And this one's from the U.S., but I don't know if you've been following the government shutdown. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, like the new, the nickname I heard for her yesterday that I love, that I'm probably going to use, is She Guevara. So She Guevara, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is the only Democrat, as I understand it, to vote with the Republicans on whether to reopen the government. So the Republicans were all saying, yeah, let's reopen the government. The Democrats were all like, let's reopen the government. The Republicans were saying no. She voted with the Republicans. And the reason why, you'll love this, the reason why Ocasio-Cortez, the freshman congresswoman from New York, voted with the Republicans is because the budget that the Democrats put forward has money for immigration enforcement. I just want you to take a moment to, because this is an attitude we have on the left in Canada as well. But she said that she refuses to vote for anything that gives money to ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So this would be like if, like a Nikki Ashton or a Michelle Rempel or a Ahmed Hassan, I mean, some MP in Canada said, I'm not voting for the federal budget because it has money for CBSA. This is the attitude. So when I say that people are willingly and willfully neglecting our borders, this is not just incompetence. This is not just ignorance. There are people that genuinely believe that a country should not be enforcing its borders and enforcing its law and enforcing its immigration law. And Canada has not just allowed illegal immigration to become the norm. Canada has actively encouraged it by its, in some cases, actions, in other cases, inactions. And there is no answer that will make sense. There's no answer that's going to satisfy my concerns about this or yours, because you have two different stories going on. You've got what Justin Trudeau is saying, and you've got what the facts at the border are saying, and the two of them do not meet. The two are like oil and vinegar or NDPers and good ideas. I mean, you're never going to find any intersection there. And even then, there's a CBC story from a little while ago about a protest that was taking place at Roxham Road. And this is from May. There was a big rally there. A bunch of people that were against illegal immigration were protesting. And the story was not about illegal immigration. The story was about far-right groups gather at Canada-US border. That's the headline. Far-right groups rally over asylum seekers at Canada-US border. And I was looking at this, some of the photos from that, and you had some people, and I talked about it then, you had some people that are kind of your ne'er-do-well types that are probably not there for the right reasons, and certainly whose message I don't like. But the people that are most outraged about this are, in fact, Canada's legal immigrants. These people who find it tremendously offensive that there is this industry now, this booming industry in Canada to bring people into the country illegally, and so very little attention paid to it, so very little attention given to it by the media, and clearly by the government at this point. So this woman who's been accused, just to reiterate, if you're tuning in just now, has been accused of something that, if convicted, could give her a $1 million penalty, or alternatively could give her years in prison, her entire life in prison. And if you do this with less than 10 people, fewer than 10 people, your first offense is no more than 10 years in prison. If you do it with more than 10 people, you can get life imprisonment. So this right here should tell you the letter of the law thinks this is important. The letter of the law, the Immigration and Refugee Act, says that this is something that should give you life in prison if you smuggle more than 10 people across the border illegally. We're not talking about an insignificant problem here. But if people themselves are coming in under false pretenses, if people are smuggling others, if people are manipulating the asylum system, at a certain point we have to say we aren't going to open our doors or our borders to this. And I know that the idea of a border wall has become Trumpist, I mean, in nature. You can't talk about a wall without it becoming to certain subsets of the population farcical. But we need to do something to start turning people away if we know this problem is going on. And that doesn't mean shutting down our asylum claims process, but it means enforcing this act. The US is not an unsafe country. And what was interesting as well, there was another report, CBC says that 50%, and this was back in summer of 2018, but 50% of the people that were making these claims at the border had some form of legal status in the US. So that's important for two reasons. Number one, it means that almost half of them are illegal in the US. Like they're almost illegal, or they're only there on a visitor visa or something like that. So about half of them don't even belong in the US. We shouldn't be offloading them or letting them offload here. But the other part of that is that it means that half of them do have status in a safe country. A safe country. So at that point, if you'd like to immigrate to Canada, do it the way anyone else does. Go to the lottery system, get a job here, get a work visa. If you have family here, come with them. There are any number of legitimate and viable means for people to come to Canada. It's not difficult to come here. Go through that process. But instead, you have queue jumpers. And when the Liberals say that queue jumping is not a problem at the border, then why are people paying? Why are people paying money to cross here if not because of queue jumping? So we're, as a country, dealing with the consequences of this. There is not just an economic consequence. There isn't just an economic price we're paying in a literal sense, from the cost to run the system, the cost to provide the social services, the cost to deport, the cost to enforce, but there's a human cost in this country when you have the cultural fabric of the country disrupted by lawbreakers. And this is not an indictment of immigrants or immigration. It's an indictment of illegal immigration. And not once, even in, let me just pull up the CTV story here, or the Canadian press story. So this is the story that we're seeing everywhere about the woman charged. Woman faces charges of smuggling asylum seekers. Not once in the story does the word illegal appear. Not once in the one story. In another, it does. But there's one of the stories here where illegal does not appear. We're still using this nomenclature of irregular, and the one that CBC loves to use. CBC doesn't even like irregular now, because irregular is a buzzword for illegal. Everyone knows they're the same. So CBC will just say crossing between border points, which just makes it sound like, oh yes, I crossed the street, not at a crosswalk. Like CBC thinks this is like jaywalking. Like, oh yeah, because they view the whole country as a welcome mat. So if you're allowed to cross at a border point, you're allowed to cross at a non-border point, and you just, once you get in here, you check in on the other side, like a hotel. I just checked in on the app, and here I am. It's ridiculous. And I would love to see how the Liberal government is going to respond, because in an election year, people start paying a bit more attention to the news. And in a lot of cases, we might actually see more of these stories because the government wants to thump its chest and start bragging more about how, we're making busts and we're enforcing. But I want to know where the enforcement has been the last 2 years. I want to know where the enforcement, apart from these cases that look isolated but really aren't, where it's been. And that's not happening. We have a media that's not paying attention. We have a government that's being complicit in the problem by not acting. We've got agencies that are responding to the agenda of the government and not doing what their mandate is. And I want to make clear, this is not the fault of RCMP officers or CBSA officers. They take their orders on stuff like this from the politicians. So we have to look at the politicians. And again, no one is driving this discussion. And when I came on board, it was back in July with True North. One of the big reasons was because I wanted to be with a platform that was not just unafraid to tackle the issues, but was doing it with the facts and holding people to account over it. I mean, doing the research, but also the advocacy and the reporting on it. And I'm proud that we're doing that. I mean, I'm here today doing this and talking about this issue in a way that no one else is. And before I wrap up, I do have to, on that note, tell you that we can't do that without your support. We just can't. I'm going to put a link in the chat box over to the right here that we need your help. I mean, if you want us to drive these issues, I see a lot of people right now that are outraged about what's happening in Canada. Well, we need people that are going to bring truth to it. I'm a part of that team. Candace Malcolm is. Anthony Fury is. We need your help to do it. If you can chip in even a couple of dollars a month or $10 a month to join the Heritage Club, it goes a long way to making sure that there's some accountability on this, because we need it. That's it for me. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. We'll talk to you next week. For True North, I'm Andrew Lawton. Thank you, God bless, and good day, Canada.